Please.
This is hard.
Will the chamber please come back to order? Will the chamber come to order? Representative Arsimowitz.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker.
Good afternoon, sir.
Madam Speaker, I rise to move for suspension of our rules for immediate consideration of Senate Bill 1094.
The question before the chamber is on suspension of our rules for the immediate consideration of Senate Bill number 1094. 1094. Is there objection? Is there objection? Hearing none, the rules are suspended for that purpose. And will the clerk please now call calendar number 683.
House Calendar 683, favorable report of the Joint Standing Committee on Public Safety and Security, Senate Bill 1094, an act concerning emergency services and public protection.
Representative Dargan.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move acceptance of the joint favorable report, passage of the bill in concurrence with the Senate.
The question is acceptance of the Joint Committee's favorable report and passage of the bill in concurrence with the Senate. Representative Dargan.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The underlying bill just basically updates the name of Department of Emergency Service and Public Protection, and I move for its adoption.
The question before the chamber is on adoption of Senate Amendment Schedule A. Will you remark? Will you remark on Senate Amendment Schedule A? Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A couple of questions to the proponent of the bill, if I could.
Please proceed, sir.
Madam Speaker, can you tell me what LCO number we're looking at? Okay.
No, that's not what you need to do. You need to call this amendment and bring out the amendment, okay? So you need to move down the script to that public.
I know, it's messed up.
You were premature. Just tell him you reserve. You know, you'd like to be.
She's gonna recognize me.
Okay. You have the floor.
Madam Speaker, I will yield the floor back to you.
Representative Sampson, thank you very much. Representative Steve Dargan.
Madam Speaker, at this time, the clerk is in possession of Amendment LCO 8513. May you please call? I'd be allowed to summarize.
Will the clerk please call LCO number 8513, which has been previously designated as Senate Amendment Schedule A.
Senate Amendment Schedule A, LCO 8513, introduced by Senators William, Representative Sharkey, Senator Looney, Representative Arsimowitz, Senator McKinney, and Representative Caparo.
Madam Speaker.
The Representative Caparo.
Madam Speaker, I wonder if the chamber could stand at ease because there's very few, in fact, no copies of the amendment available on this side of the aisle.
The chamber will stand at ease while we're waiting for copies to be distributed. Thank you. Will the House please come back to order? Will the House please come back to order? And I believe Representative Dargan, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. At this time, if the clerk can call LCO number 8513, and I'd be allowed to summarize.
I believe, Representative, we already did that, and you moved adoption, and we were going to begin talking on Senate A when we realized there weren't copies distributed. So...
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to repeat that for the good speaker and the good clerk so there was no confusion, because there wasn't any on my behalf. But thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Representative Dargan.
Madam Speaker, a few months ago we did a bill which had emotional debate on all sides of the issue, dealing more specifically with guns within our state. Today, Madam Speaker, we're dealing with a couple of amendments to clarify a number of issues from a number of individuals that have came forth of issues within that specific bill. Not only to thank the leaders, majority leader, minority leader that are sitting here, my ranking member, Gigler, my vice chair, Representative Berenga, and my good friend, Representative Minor. So at this time, if I can, Madam Speaker, I would like to talk more specifically about this amendment. This amendment that's before us today clarifies a number of language in a number of different sections. It allows individuals to register assault weapons they purchase before the date of the passage of the bill, but which were not delivered. There was a number of confusion dealing with that after the passage of the bill because of order backlogs. It also clarifies the language ensuring that these individuals can lawfully take possession of those weapons that they have contracted for. Underneath this amendment, a lawful possession of those assault weapons can be evidenced by a writing indicating that a legally binding contract for purchase was entered into on or before the effective date of the passage of the original bill. It also goes on to talk about how it was paid for the weapon in full or in part. Those in possession of assault weapons will also be allowed to attest on their oath at the time of the registration that they had been in possession of the weapon on or before that effective date. It goes on to clarify that individuals who purchase assault weapons or large capacity magazines on the morning of April 4th, the day that the governor signed the bill at 12:20 in the afternoon, can register or declare such weapons and magazines and can continue to lawfully possess them. The underlying bill was unclear as to those weapons purchased on the day of enactment, and that simply clarifies that for a number of individuals. It also goes on to clarify that only sworn and duly certified law enforcement officers at police department, DESPI, as opposed to other employees, can purchase and possess assault weapons and large capacity magazines. It goes on to clarify that these officers must have written authorization from their departments to purchase these assault weapons. It adds certain inspectors and officers at DMV, the Chief State's Attorney's Office, DEEP, and certain post-certified constables where there were some outstanding issues, acting as police officers to those individuals that can purchase such weapons, as long as they have written authorization from the department to do so. It also gives sworn armored car policemen the right to carry large capacity magazines as part of their official duty. These were some issues that were not in the specific bill that we passed. It goes on and clarifies that sworn law enforcement officers, certain inspectors, again, officers at DMV, the Chief State's Attorney's Office, deep and written post-certified constables, police officers, are exempted from the new long gun and ammunition certification requirement until they separate or retire from his or her position. It also allows federally licensed, what we call curios or relics collectors, to buy such firearms directly from other licensed collectors. Curios and relics are firearms that are between 50 and 75 years old. It clarifies that issue. It goes on to clarify that exempted law enforcement officers, certain inspectors, officers at DMV, again, the Chief State's Attorney's Office, deep, and certain post-certified constables acting as that police officers do not have to register to declare assault weapons or large capacity magazines that they use as part of their official duties while they are on active duty, but are required to register those assault weapons in large capacity magazines within 90 days of when they separate from active service. It also goes on to clarify that federally licensed firearm manufacturers can freely possess large capacity magazines for their firearms and are not required underneath the law to declare that those possession. It also authorized DESPI to adopt regulations allowing the continuous sale of certain Olympic target pistols that are assault weapons underneath the new law. These will be the only assault weapons that may be sold or transferred in Connecticut or only under limited circumstances. Purchasers will be required to attest they are buying the pistols for competition and or target shooting purposes and must continue to register them. DESPI regulations will also can allow residents of other states to bring these such target pistols into Connecticut to participate in collegiate and or other formal competitions. It also goes on, Mr. Speaker, allows individuals to leave assault weapons when they legally possess them for their underage beneficiaries at the time of their death through the means of a trust that can possess that assault weapon until the beneficiary turns 21, Mr. Speaker. It also goes on to clarify that individuals who place assault weapons on consignment or pawn them before the date of passage can legally get such weapons back at consignment shop. I'm speaking a little out of turn because that will be in Section B, Senate Amendment B, so let me not speak about that for the time being. It also requires firearm dealers who assist individuals with the private sale of long guns to initiate any background checks through DESPI instead of contacting the federal government directly. It also clarifies that criminal background checks required for ammunition certification is a state-level background check as opposed to a national check. And it goes on to clarify that semi-automatic rifles that were assault weapons prior to the passage of the underlying bill will continue to be defined as assault weapons. Mr. Speaker, this was in a collaboration of a number of legislators in this room, also from input from gun retailers and gun manufacturers within our state. So no matter how you stood on the original bill that we did, we tried to clear up a number of issues that were outstanding to a number of legislators in here on both sides of the aisles that received input either from their constituents or the gun industry or retailers within our state. So I'm happy that this fix is before us, and I do move for its adoption.
Thank you, sir. The question before the chamber is adoption of Senate Amendment A. Will you remark? Representative Minor, the 66th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure whether anyone intended for comments to be made about the bill in general to be made now or after the next amendment gets done, but let me just say that I intend to support this amendment and would certainly have maybe a couple of questions to ask the good representative once this is passed.
Thank you, sir. Again, for those who wish to offer questions on Senate Amendment A, Representative Nugent. On Senate Amendment A? Thank you. Representative Sampson of the 80th. On Senate A.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do have a couple of questions on Senate Amendment A.
Please proceed, sir.
So through you, Mr. Speaker, to the proponent, I want to stick to just one very, very small section, which is lines 295 through lines 297 of LCO 8513. I'm wondering if the kind chairman of the Public Safety Committee would share for me what this language means. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Mr. Speaker, just give me a moment.
Thanks.
Mr. Speaker, through you, I just wanted to make sure I was looking at my notes. I believe in my quick overview that I might have stated before, and it's still in existence. Anything that was banned prior to the bill is still banned through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess the question I have is, it's a very confusing section. It refers to sections of an underlying statute and a subsequent revision, and then an effective date. And I'm wondering if the chairman would let us know what those sections require. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I know that it talks about the revision in 1958 and then revised in January 1st of 2013. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, well, I guess I will describe what my understanding is, and that is that prior to the bill being passed early in April, we had an assault weapons ban in Connecticut, and it included both centerfire and rimfire firearms. And it made any weapon that had a detachable magazine subject to a provision that if they had 2 cosmetic features, it would become an assault weapon. When the bill was passed earlier this year, a policy change was made so that we would be changing the definition of an assault weapon to include only centerfire rifles and ones that have a pistol grip, a detachable magazine, and 1 cosmetic feature. So my understanding here is that this language is going to say that any firearm that might have been subject to the earlier definition is now also banned, as well as weapons that are defined by the new definition of an assault weapon. Through you, Mr. Speaker, is that correct?
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I know there's been some confusion on that, on referencing the rimfire semi-automatic firearms with the detachable magazine, but to the good gentleman, that answer I would say would be yes.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So certainly there are folks that purchased firearms after the previous bill passed early in April that would have not fit into the new definition of an assault weapon. And for simplification for the chamber, I would say anything that is a rimfire weapon, which some of us learned were called plinkers also, would no longer be banned and considered assault weapons at that time. Is that correct through you, Mr. Speaker?
Representative Dargan.
Through you, that is correct, yes.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So my understanding is that this particular language is going to make it so those weapons that we unbanned as of the earlier bill in April are now going to be rebanned again. Is that correct through you, Mr. Speaker?
Representative Dargan.
Through you, I would say that answer is yes, too.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess my only concern here is that this particular bill has been described as the fix-it bill for some time. And I do appreciate the effort and energy that has been put in it because I think on the whole it does many, many good things that were required because of the haste and confusion that was created by the bill that we passed in April. And I am very, very pleased to see the number of changes which were enumerated by the chairman of the Public Safety Committee, including, taking care of folks that had certain firearms in limbo, per se, say at a gun dealer or something like that, and some of the other changes that are in here. I'm a little disappointed because I have a list of about 25 or so fix-its that have come to our attention since that bill was passed, and we've really only addressed a very, very small number of them. But I would in general say any progress to clarify what the law is for our law-abiding citizens in our state is a positive move. This, however, I don't see as a clarification. I see this as a policy change. The fact is we are going to ban more firearms if we pass this than are currently banned. And for that reason, I will be voting no on this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. To remark further on Senate Amendment A. Representative Minor for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I attempted to try and get us to a point in time when we would be able to discuss the bill in total, including the next amendment. But I'm afraid that if we move off of this point, there may be some confusion about what my understanding this section does versus what just occurred. In fact, to kind of highlight that, when the Senate passed the bill, there was an attempt to, I think, clarify that question through an amendment on the Senate floor. And if I could ask your indulgence to talk about what occurred, that would have made clear that any changes in perceived policy or policy that may have occurred on the day that we voted on the underlying bill that we're attempting to fix, which would have been the April 4th date, that if people perceive that to be a change in policy, that policy would then move forward. I'm not convinced that in fact was the case. In fact, the Senate amendment failed. And my understanding is that the crux of that amendment was how many what's the phrase? Options, features is one allowed to have and was one allowed to have on a long rifle and qualify as an assault weapon. I think we all understood when we took the bill up originally that this had to do with a detachable magazine and a pistol grip. And Representative Dargan and I went to speak with the two people that were involved in the debate upstairs, Senator Guglielmo and Senator Hartley, relative to that secondary amendment which failed, to try and clear up whether or not it was the intention on April 4th to allow a rimfire gun with more features to be legal, fall outside that, I think what some people refer to as the assault weapon ban. And after that conversation, including staff in the Senate, in fact, there was a very clear understanding, I think on both Representative Dargan's part and mine, that what this amendment attempts to do is to make it clear that rimfire long rifles with a detachable magazine, under the law now as it stands in the land, can only be 10 rounds to be sold in the state of Connecticut, can have a pistol grip, but can't have an additional feature. So the feature would be exactly the way it was pre-April 4th, so let's pick April 1st. And what we did in the state of Connecticut was decouple the larger centerfire rounds and the smaller rimfire rounds, which gets to a level of technicality that eludes even me sometimes. So if I could, a question through you to Representative Dargan, please.
Please proceed, sir.
Representative Dargan, in Section 3, the language that was just referred to Is it true, as the amendment is drafted, that certain rimfire semi-automatic firearms with detachable magazines mentioned in this second that were legal on April 1st would still be legal as of the passage of this bill? Through you.
Representative Dargan.
Right, prior to that date of April 1st, yes.
Representative Minor.
And so I think what that attempts to highlight is that if someone today, bill hasn't passed yet, was to walk into a gun dealer and want to buy a long rifle with a detachable magazine and a pistol grip, and it met this new language, that would still be legal. After the passage of this bill, if I were to ask Representative Dargan, if that same long gun with 2 more features on it was to be bought after the passage of that bill, would that purchase be legal through you?
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Madam, Mr. Speaker, how many features through you?
Representative Minor.
2 more features beyond the features that would have been legal on April 1st.
Representative Dargan.
In that case, we go with the 1+1 rule. 1+2 would be illegal through you.
Representative Minor.
Right. So the question becomes for the chamber, what was our intention on the 4th? And I can tell you from my perspective, I didn't think the intention of this chamber or the other was to expand the possibility when it came to these types of guns. But I do think that we very clearly wanted to make a distinction between low caliber and large caliber. And I think that's where the confusion came in, Mr. Speaker. And so gun aficionados, not to their fault, and gun dealers may very well have sold a gun from April 4th to now that had more than 1 feature. And what this amendment attempts to do is to respect the fact that we may have said that and clarify the fact that someone may have bought it, but you can keep it. And just as you wouldn't have been able to buy it on April 1st, you won't be able to buy it after the passage of this bill because of the additional features. And the only reason you would have to register it would be that it qualifies under the feature standard that we have in the bill, the underlying bill, as an assault weapon. So I understand, and I'm probably as pure a gun nut as anybody, and this may be a defining moment where some people decide that I'm not. But I do believe that the reason for this was to try and clarify questions that have come to the chamber, this chamber, and upstairs, irrespective of party, to make sure that no one inadvertently became a felon. I don't think that was your intent. That wasn't mine. Whether you voted for the bill, as Representative Dargan said, or you didn't, I think the majority of this amendment provides clarity some areas that I intended to take up later, and I may, so that people do the right thing. And we recognize in this section that some people may have bought guns that we may not have been as clear as we could have been, or may not have done what some of us wanted to have happen. But I think it does do what we intended to do under the fix-it bill, so to speak. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Care to remark further on Senate Amendment A? Distinguished Minority Leader, Representative Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we are blessed to have so many people in the chamber, and first among them, Representative Minor, who are so familiar with, first of all, our gun laws and firearms in general. I'm one of the people who are not that familiar, but had to do a crash course, certainly, while we were debating the gun bill that was passed in April. And with regard to the issue that was brought up by Representative Sampson, if the chamber will indulge me, because maybe many people who are not firearm experts will understand the lingo that I'm about to try to explain. Prior to April 4th, when we passed the gun bill, our laws said since 1994 that if you have a long gun, it will be considered an assault weapon if you have a detachable magazine and two of the following features: a pistol grip, a flash suppressor, a grenade launcher, and a folding stock or telescopic stock. Maybe there were more. I know those four. So you had guns that had a detachable magazine and a pistol grip, but a solid stock, no flash suppressor, no bayonet clip, no grenade launcher, etc. Those were legal. In that 1994 law, we never distinguished between centerfire rifles and rimfire rifles. During the negotiations and the gun debate this April, we, as Representative Minor correctly stated, wanted to distinguish, as we redefined what an assault weapon was, between a centerfire rifle and a rimfire rifle, or .22 caliber, or plinker as it's been called. So we also wanted to redefine what an assault weapon was. We said an assault weapon is a long gun that has a detachable magazine and one of the following features: pistol grip or thumbhole stock, a bayonet clip, grenade launcher, folding or telescopic sight, etc. We said that if a plinker or a .22 caliber or a rimfire rifle had the old test, that two-prong test, that was not going to be considered an assault rifle. We excluded that from the definition, and as we speak here today, and if this bill passes tomorrow and the next day, those .22 caliber guns that might look exactly like the ones that we now ban or call assault rifles are legal. They were then, and they are now, and they will be tomorrow if we pass this bill. So let's be clear about that. This bill does not all of a sudden consider .22 caliber rifles that have a detachable magazine and one of those features an assault weapon. It does not. We purposely excluded .22 calibers from the law we passed in April, and they will continue to be excluded. Period. End of story. Where the confusion comes is that it could have been interpreted, and that is why it's necessary to clarify, that when we passed the bill in April, we not only excluded these rimfire .22 caliber rifles from the new definition of assault weapons, but we excused them from the old definition of assault weapons, as if we now were saying you could buy a .22 caliber with a bayonet clip, a grenade launcher, a folding stock, etc. That was never, ever, ever the intent. However, because that was not addressed in the bill passed on April 4th, as has been pointed out, there are some people that might have thought, we can now do that. And they might have purchased a gun that not only had a pistol grip, detachable magazine, but maybe an additional feature or features such as a folding telescopic stock, a bayonet clip, a flash suppressor, or a grenade launcher. I believe you'll find in the next amendment that we're going to say, okay, we get that you got confused upon that, and you can keep it as long as you register it. But we want to make clear that we certainly weren't expanding what we did in 1993, or I should say undoing what we did in 1993, and confirming that .22 caliber rimfire rifles that have a detachable magazine and one of those features will not be treated like an assault weapon. So I want that to be very clear with regard to this bill. That's coming sort of from a layman's point of view. But there was talk about that, oh my God, we thought rimfire .22 calibers with a detachable magazine and one feature, be that the pistol grip, were okay now and continue to be, we're okay then and continue to be okay, or in other words, exempted from what we did April 4th. And oh my God, this bill will change that. No, 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 no. Wrong. It doesn't. We continue to make a distinction in this state between centerfire rifles and rimfire rifles. What this bill does is clarify so many of the issues that were matters of confusion based on the other bill. From a gun owner's point of view, a law-abiding gun owner's point of view, this bill clarifies many things and gives people back what may have been withheld from them because of the confusion. Because with due respect, regardless of what you thought of the other bill, whether you voted for or against it, it was never, ever, ever the intention of that bill, or this bill, God knows, to confiscate or take away or deprive of something of somebody that they already lawfully own. Never. No one is losing a gun. And it would be a shame, in my opinion, if this amendment, which was done on behalf and for law-abiding gun owners who were caught in that confusion, to have this amendment interpreted as anything but that. So, Mr. Speaker, I stand in support of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Care to remark further on Senate Amendment A? Care to remark further on Senate Amendment A? If not, let me try your minds. All those in favor of Senate Amendment A, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Nay. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Care to remark further on the bill as amended? Representative Dargan.
Thank you very much, Speaker Sharkey. The clerk is in possession of LCO number 8619. May you please call and I'd be allowed to summarize.
Will the clerk please call LCO number 8619, which has been previously designated Senate Amendment B?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. LCO number 8619, designated Senate Amendment Schedule B, offered by Senator Williams, Representative Sharkey et al.
Gentlemen, is asked to leave the chamber to summarize. Is there objection? Is there objection? Seeing none, you may proceed with summarization, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I know that the 6 respective leaders are on this amendment, but this really is the Representative Minor amendment. Because at about 11 o'clock this morning, we went up to the Senate chambers to deal with a clarification that Representative Minor seemed fit, and of course, as some Senate Democrats will do, they were in a little bit of opposition to doing anything. As they said to me and Representative Minor, well, you had plenty of time to look at it. Now, using a Larry Capero, Representative Capero moment, I didn't get it to midnight Saturday, so we didn't have a lot of time to really look at it. So I'm in agreement with my minority leader, but the good sense of the Senate Democrats, they decided to go forth because they were a little scared of Representative Minor and Representative Dargan, And they heard that Representative Sampson was coming up next, and that really scared them. So that's why we have this amendment before us. This amendment specifically deals with the one section deals with the trust and/or beneficiary, and the other issue dealt with licensed gun owners or pawnbroker license, with some issues of people that might have taken their guns to the pawnbrokers, and during the confusion they weren't necessarily able to get them back. So I move for its adoption.
Question before the chamber is adoption of Senate Amendment B. Would you care to remark? Representative Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the exception of all the other comments that Representative Dargan made, just sticking strictly to the facts on page 2, I think what this does, this language here, does align the treatment of handguns that may have been left in a consignment or pawnbroker facility so that they can get their gun back. And I think that's under the underlying bill as amended, that takes the same action with regard to long guns. So I would suggest passage. Thank you. Or urge passage.
Thank you, sir. Would you care to remark further on Senate Amendment B? Would you care to remark further on Senate Amendment B? Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, sir. Through you, Mr. Speaker, I do have a couple of simple questions to Representative Dargan, if I may.
Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, sir. To Representative Dargan, if I may ask you, on line 7, it takes away the two words, this act, and replaces it by Public Act 13-3. Would you be kind enough to describe for us the difference between what this act means versus Act 13-3? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, this just clarifies the language underneath the larger Senate Amendment A. It wasn't clear. This basically clarifies the language if, in fact, there was a trust and or beneficiary that wanted to leave a gun or a number of guns to some individual that was under the age of 21. Through you.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, Mr. Speaker, to Representative Dargan. So essentially, in the previous bill that was passed some time back in April, that ability of a dealer to transfer those guns to a trust were not there in the bill, but now they are, if I'm correct. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, in that section, that is correct. It was not clear to some of the owners of these specific individual shops, stores, consignment pawnbrokers, whether or not after the effective date, if they would be in violation of the law, and it was not the intent of this General Assembly to do that, and that's why this fix is here. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to Representative Dargan. And through you, Mr. Speaker, if I am correct, lines 15 and 16 basically specify that all of this that we have just spoken about will be eligible and effective until October 1, 2013. And then after that, would this become a violation of the statute? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, that would be correct, yes.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So for legislative intent, then, we have like now a grace period, if I may call it that way, between April 14, 2013 and October 1st, 2013 for the purpose of doing the transfer of those weapons, if I'm correct. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
If I may just clarify, sir, or did you say April 14th or April 4th?
April 4th, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, that is correct, yes.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I truly appreciate the answers, and I do intend to support this amendment.
Thank you, sir. Would you care to remark further on Senate Amendment B? If not, let me try your minds. All those in favor of Senate Amendment B, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. To carry remark further on the bill as amended. To carry remark further on the bill as amended. Representative Dargan? Representative Minor, the 66th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the bill as amendment, I didn't remember everything that Representative Dargan mentioned. Some of those went immediately out of my mind when they included my name and others. But I know there was another issue that gun manufacturers came to us with, and that was the ability to move parts around the state of Connecticut. And all of us, I think, are concerned about jobs. And the best I can determine, this bill allows them to continue to deal with subcontractors within the state of Connecticut. So if someone manufactures a receiver, they can send it out and have it powder coated. They can have it tooled. They can have it, whatever it needs to be done prior to the law, they'll be able to do that again under this bill. It's my understanding that there may still be a bit of a question with regard to warranty. Under federal law, if I were to send a gun back through a dealer to a manufacturer, it's my understanding, Mr. Speaker, that they can't all be fixed, and from time to time, they actually replace that gun. And if the members of the chamber don't know, that's a paperwork nightmare, because that serial number is assigned to you. And so I'm hoping that after the passage of this, we'll be able to work administratively with DESP to make sure that for those that in those very rare occasions when someone who lawfully owns a gun sends it back in good faith to have it repaired and finds that they can't send that exact gun back, which is required under federal law, that we will permit that kind of an exchange in those circumstances. I'm not sure it's prohibited in here. I think the gun manufacturers are asking for some clarification, and I certainly would commit to try and work on that in the future. Mr. Speaker, I oppose the original bill for a number of reasons, and I support this language because I think it does attempt to at least square the intent of that bill on that night, on that day, with what the public was hoping to have happen. They didn't intend to get their gun caught up in a consignment shop somewhere. They didn't intend to do anything wrong in buying a gun that may not have met our intent. There were a lot of questions that I was asked about how far below the stock of a handgun can the magazine be. They went on, and I think on a lot of people's parts, they tracked questions and tried to get answers. And so to the extent this fixes some of those answers, I think it's the best kind of public policy decision I could make, having voted against the original bill, because I do think it provides clarity to the extent that it is. And as Representative Dargan said, if there are other things that come to our attention, I think there are good people in this building, and I think that if we can continue to try and address those questions and keep law-abiding citizens out of trouble, we'll all be better for it. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Carey, remark further on the bill as amended. Representative Altobello of the 82nd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question or two to the proponent of the bills amended, please.
Please proceed, sir.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Speaker. On the day that the governor signed the bill, and I think you had indicated earlier that it was approximately 12:20 in the afternoon, there were still people trying to purchase firearms, and their state police checks were going on for many hours after that. Through you, Mr. Speaker, my question is, does the language in this bill as amended more or less validate those purchases that actually were finalized after the governor signed the bill? Through you.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, there was some confusion on that. I would say any purchase that day to midnight or to the next day would not be in violation of the law. Through you.
Representative Altobello.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the proponent. I had just read an online account of what happened in the Senate, and the answer would have been contrary, so I just wanted that clarified. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Carey, remark further on the bill as amended. Representative Nugent of the 74th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon to you, sir, again.
Good afternoon, sir.
On the bill as amended, obviously I rise in support of this bill. I do have some questions that I would like to ask through you to Representative Dargan, primarily for legislative intent and clarification. Through you,
Please
Mr.
proceed,
Speaker.
sir.
To Representative Dargan, I'm looking at line 54. And basically, old language on line 54 says members or employees of the. That has been eliminated and replaced by the Department of Emergency Services and so on. And then it also continued to the Division of Criminal Justice, Department of Motor Vehicles, and so on. Would you be kind enough to describe how would this be different? If we are saying the department, what does this mean? Does this mean perhaps a part-time employee of the department would be eligible for the same privileges and benefits through you, Mr. Speaker?
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, yes, that is correct. Sometimes when they reference department, some law enforcement communities or either state agencies will do the purchasing of firearms through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative James.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So through you, Mr. Speaker, if I am a part-time employee of any of those organizations that are referenced in this section, would I be eligible then to go out and purchase an assault weapon in my own name through you, Mr. Speaker?
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, the answer to that would be no.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So through you, Mr. Speaker, to Representative Dargan, in reference to this paragraph then, with the good representative describes to me what is permissible then in this paragraph. How do they purchase these assault weapons and why are they listed accordingly? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, as I stated before, it would be up to that specific department in order to buy those firearms. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I presume then, through you, Mr. Speaker, that those weapons will be purchased by the department to be used by one specific employee during the discharge of his or her own duty as employee of that department. Am I correct, through you, Mr. Speaker?
Representative Dargan.
The answer is yes.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, Mr. Speaker, if that employee leaves the department and that employee somehow, let me rephrase that. If the employee leaves the department, would he or she be obligated immediately to turn over their weapon back to the department? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, in most cases, that service revolver or long gun is probably owned by that specific department. But there was language in respect to if, in fact, that someone that was post-certified on his or her, on the time of their retirement, they would have X amount of days similar to everyone else in order to register that specific gun. Through you.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that's exactly what I'm leading to, because later on in the bill, it says that 90 days after discharge or retirement, they will be able to go register the gun and keep it under their own name. So if that is the case, then we do have a previous employee who somehow owns on his or her own an assault weapon, and would this be permitted then? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, a number of communities, law enforcement communities, in some of them, they purchase the weapon. In other communities, they get permission from the chain of command in order to purchase a specific weapon. In that case, if it's in the time of his or her employment, that person would be exempt. But on the retirement of that specific individual, that individual purchased the gun, he or she would have to register just like any other individuals within the state underneath the current bill. Through you.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, Mr. Speaker, to Representative Dargan, I would like Representative Dargan, just for legislative intent, to explain in lines 76 and 77 the meaning of nuclear facility licensed by the United States. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
That was an issue. That's a good question, because I know when there was questions early in this, The Nuclear Regulatory Authority, which we have a facility in Waterford, Connecticut, underneath federal law, they carry a minimum of a 30 magazine clip. So that's what that's related to, through you.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, Mr. Speaker, to Representative Dargan, lines 109 to 111, it seems to me now this is new language that say a trustee or an executor of an estate will be able to transfer an assault weapons to someone else. And for legislative intent, would this mean that my executor, who in this case happens to be my daughter, will be able to transfer assault weapons from my name to somebody else as being the executor or the trustee of an estate? Am I correct in that? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, yes. The answer is yes.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, Mr. Speaker, I like for legislative intent once again classify and clarify lines 295 to 297. And I think Representative Minor and Representative Cafero cleared this matter in a very, very eloquent manner. Just want to make sure that nothing that was not banned in the previous bill that was passed back on April 4th, 2013 is going to be banned on those three lines, 295 to 297, for legislative intent. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Can you hold up just 1 minute, Mr. Speaker, to make sure I have the right answer?
Please take your time, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I apologize for that. Through you, Mr. Speaker. Through you, Mr. Speaker, I was looking at some of my notes from before, so I apologize. Through you, the answer would be anything that was banned prior would still be banned. Through you.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm satisfied with this answer. And through you, Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at lines 385 and 386. And later on in some other lines of this legislation, it speaks about Olympic trials or target shooting. I don't know if we have too many Olympic trials in the state of Connecticut, but if we are mixing Olympic trials and target shooting, would this mean that anyone now who would want to go target shooting or target practicing could claim that I'm trying to prepare myself for an Olympic trial and therefore be able to own those assault weapons for this purpose? I hope I am clear on this, just to make sure for legislative intent. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, although DESPL will deal with a number of these issues, this is really a small percentage of international Olympic target shooting type of individuals, including USA Shooting, and on a collegiate level. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the same continues on line 500 to 505, so it is very important to clarify this matter as long as we know it is on the collegiate level now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These are all the questions that I have.
All right.
I appreciate the time of this chamber.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Would you care to remark further on the bill as amended? Representative Piscopo of the 76th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've been listening pretty carefully to debate. I read the amendments, and I just have one, and I understand all the answers. I just have one quick question. It's to do with a firearm manufacturer. There was a firearm manufacturer, I think it's Stag Firearms in New Britain, Connecticut. He, entrepreneur, he makes firearms, and he analyzed the Connecticut law very carefully. So he developed a weapon that was to conform with the law we passed in April. My question to you, my question to the opponent through you, Mr. Speaker, is with the new weapon that Stag has just developed, he had a prototype, it's in production, no one has bought it yet. Would that be acceptable under this language through you, Mr. Speaker?
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I honestly can't answer that question because I don't know if the prototype to that gun is done, and Stag Arms would probably be better having a conversation with the permitting unit of DESPI in order to see if it's in the legal definition of the law. So I'm sorry, Representative Piscopo, that I can't give you a more definitive answer, but I think that whether it's Stag Arms or another number of other manufacturers within the state, if they do go forward with a new specification and or prototype, that they have that conversation with the authority that will regulate all the licensing components and what the actual law does. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Piscopo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for his answer.
Thank you, sir. To care to remark further on the bill as amended, Representative Belinsky of the 106th. No.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon. Is it evening yet? Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
This is cool. Mr. Speaker, through you, I have a comment for a proponent of the bill as well as a question.
Please proceed, sir.
Okay. As far as the comment goes, I want to thank the proponents and the workers of the bill for fixing some of the unintended consequences in the original legislation. It, I believe, represents a good body of work. My question, however, revolves around a provision of the Homeland Security Act of 2006 in H.R. 218, officers and retired officers qualifying under the same criteria as active officers may carry firearms anywhere in the United States, and that includes over state lines with some restrictions. I'm wondering, in the 45 pages of amendment that are standing before me right now, if we have addressed this particular concern. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There is a lot of discussion on the underlying bill and discussion within the fix-up bill, too, that we didn't want to hurt any law enforcement official in his or her capacity of the law, but there is a number of other individuals that came to us that said law enforcement should not get a carve-out, and if they're not in the law enforcement activity and or community when they're retired, that they should have to go underneath the same laws on registering as every other good gun law-abiding citizen within the state. And I know there's been some discussion from retired law enforcement officials that I have talked to, and we haven't dealt with that in this part of the larger amendment or the smaller amendment before us. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Belinsky.
Thank you to the good gentleman, and through you, Mr. Speaker, I would submit that if we're talking about and I'm not certain how to qualify any of this, Representative Darden, but if we're talking about a retiree who's a relatively recent retiree and he's following all of the laws, for instance, the individual to whom I'm referring right now does requalify annually with the police academy here in Connecticut, and I believe that in doing such he qualifies himself under the Homeland Security Act as, if you would, a law enforcement agent, even though he's not currently employed. He serves a role that would not be all that different from an air marshal on an aircraft, except he's not active duty. But, being there covertly, undercover, a crime could certainly be prevented by having somebody with 30 years of law enforcement service available with a firearm, qualified, once a year to be sure that they are, okay to carry that and still understand the basic objectives of the job of law enforcement. Through you, Mr. Speaker, is there something we can do to address that, and can it be put on our next wish list?
Representative Darden.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I know on the federal level, federal law dealing with air marshals and the Justice Department and the FBI, although on a local and state level, the example that you gave of a peace officer, of someone that's retired, that's still in good standing, that gets recertified through post, that individual right now would have to go through the normal process of registering his or her guns, and if the person, that individual, did come out of retirement and work in a peace officer status that was post-certified, he or she at that time would be able to carry that service revolver that would not be subject to the current bill or the prior bill that we did. But to the last part of your question, we'll probably, as we move forward, we'll have further discussions. And since I hear from a lot of law enforcement personnel on this, we'll look at it and discuss it further in the future. And I appreciate your input to that issue and try to come to some resolution to that issue. Through you, thank you.
Representative Malinsky.
All right. Also through you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Representative Dargan. Look forward to working with you on that, and thank you very much for the work you've done on this bill.
Thank you, sir. Would you care to remark? Would you care to remark further on the bill as amended? Representative Sampson of the 80th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good evening.
Good evening, sir.
I have a couple of questions for the proponent of the bill on the bill as amended.
Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm hoping the chairman of the Public Safety Committee, who's done a fine job of answering the questions so far, can help me out on a couple of things. We determined that back in April we made a policy change with regard to what rimfire firearms would fall under an assault weapons ban. And if this amended bill passes, we will be, again, making another change, albeit, from what I understand, to revert back to what the law was prior to the beginning of April. And that's really what I'm inquiring about, is two things. First, what happens to anyone that purchased a firearm between the passage of the first bill and if this bill passes? It's my understanding that we are in some way protecting them, but I'm hoping that the chairman can illustrate that for us. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I know there's been a lot of discussion and heard input referencing the certain rimfire semi-automatic weapons with the detached magazine. And with that, they could, underneath the law that we passed, they could get a certificate in order to make them legal underneath the law. Through you.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, from what I understand, we are going to essentially allow anyone who made a purchase between the first bill and this one we're going to grandfather them so they would have been able to purchase a rimfire rifle that is only subject to the one feature test that exists in the new bill, or no features actually, as long as they purchased it within that window. Is that correct, through you, Mr. Speaker?
Through you, Mr. Speaker, that answer is yes.
All right.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the good chairman for his answer. So, just a follow-up. So, I'm wondering which feature tests will be used for rimfire rifles going forward. Will it be the two-feature test that was in existence prior to the bill in April, or is it going to be subject to the assault weapons ban that we have established for all other rifles going forward from that point? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Target.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I think the correct answer is Representative would know the so-called 1-on-1. Through you.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's an interesting answer because I had interpreted the bill to be the opposite. So we are in fact not going back to the way things used to be prior to the first bill in April, but instead making rimfire rifles subject to the new definition of an assault weapons ban. Is that correct? Through Mr. Speaker?
Representative
Mr. Speaker, I'm so used to it. There's so many different definitions, so let me back up. I misquoted myself with the 1-on-1. It would be 1 and 2 through you with the rimfire, so let me just clarify that.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I believe that by 1 and 2, you mean the prior definition of an assault weapons ban prior to the passage of our bill in April, which would mean that you would still be able to purchase a .22 rimfire rifle that has a pistol grip and up to 2 features. I'd like to make sure that that is indeed the case. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Target.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, and that, no, it would be back to what I previously stated. It would be 1-on-1. Through you.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my understanding that the previous assault weapons ban allowed centerfire and rimfire rifles with a pistol grip and because it's not mentioned at all in the previous assault weapons ban, a pistol grip does not matter, but I'm pointing it out as a point of difference between the new one, a detachable magazine and a pistol grip and 2 features. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Target.
Can he repeat that question because I didn't hear it? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Sampson, could you repeat the question? Representative Sampson, could you repeat your question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just trying to clarify if this amended bill passes and I want to manufacture or save up or purchase a rimfire rifle in the future under this amended bill, which assault weapon ban applies? And I believe we said it would be the assault weapons ban that was in effect prior to 1994. In which case, I'm just trying to clarify that a rimfire rifle that has a detachable magazine and a pistol grip could still have 2 features. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Target.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, if I stand corrected, I think the ban in 1994 was 1-on-1 too. When the federal assault weapon ban expired, our state ban stayed in effect. Through you.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the gentleman for his answer. I have in front of me here the statute, 53-202A, and I don't really want to belabor this point. I just think it is very important to a number of individuals in our society, law-abiding citizens who are interested in manufacturing and purchasing and using firearms in our state, to know exactly what this law is going to do. And if you look at 53-202A, it says that the assault weapons ban is going to apply to a weapon that has a detachable magazine and a combination of no more than 2 of the following. Now, it doesn't mention pistol grip. The reason why I'm bringing that up is because we've only added pistol grip as a feature in the new assault weapons ban. So I want to be sure that it doesn't matter with respect to a rimfire rifle whether it has a pistol grip, and it will be subject to this original assault weapons ban that was in effect prior to April. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Target.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I believe that pistol grip was in the old ban too, through you.
Representative Sampson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. However, I'm certain that it's not. I don't know how to rectify that situation, and I'd rather not read the entire statute here, but it's important to me that for legislative intent that we are actually informed at the extent at which we are changing existing law. And I think this illustrates another point, which is that much like the original law, this was put together without very much public input. So I'm just going to... I don't know if the gentleman would like to stand at ease for a moment to take and review 53-202A, but I would like very much to make sure that my question is answered properly. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Sir, I believe he's answered your question. If you wish to pose a question, you may, but you have the floor, and you can ask whatever questions you want.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I have two choices, I suppose. One is to continue with what I believe is correct, or to take the gentleman's response to mean that firearms that with a pistol grip, whether they be rimfire or not going forward, will fall under the assault weapons ban. If that is the case, then we will be, in effect, banning a great number of firearms going forward from this bill that were not previously banned. If that is not true, we will still be banning a great number of firearms that were not previously banned before April. And we've made an impact on people that own these firearms who certainly after that law was passed looked it up to find out whether their firearm would fall under the requirement of being registered or not. There are people who were prospective buyers, maybe even young high school shooters competing in a league who were contemplating the purchase of such a firearm, who will have to change their tack going forward. And finally, manufacturers who, in an attempt to adapt to our recently passed legislation, might have made new style firearms for sale. And for those reasons, I'm going to have to stand in opposition to the bill. And I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, nothing upsets me more than to vote no on this proposed bill before us. I understand the effort that was put into it by the parties included. I understand why we are here, is in an effort to fix this bill that was passed, regardless of how we voted for it, to take care of law-abiding gun owners who found gray areas where the law is after that day. Unfortunately, I can only support the parts of this bill that actually fix something, and not this one section, which seems to change policy for the negative and ban more firearms than before. And I'm very, very, very upset about it, Mr. Speaker. I was hoping that we would find a way to not have that happen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. To carry remark further on the bill as amended. To carry remark further on the bill as amended. Representative Gibran of the 34th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just have a couple of questions to the proponent of the bill, please.
Please proceed, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've heard a lot of questions regarding the new definitions of when somebody has a weapon in their line of duty, and I specifically would draw the proponent's attentions to lines 60 through 73. My confusion lies in whether it's a private weapon or a weapon that's been purchased by the department. And I'm just looking for clarification, Mr. Speaker. So, for instance, on the day of the gun bill, I had several phone calls from state troopers in my district who are concerned about the differences between their own personal weapon and a weapon that may have been issued to them from the department. So through you, Mr. Speaker, to the good proponent, is there any difference in that weapon in lines 60 to 73? Through you.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, the definition again for sworn law enforcement, there's different communities that do it different ways. Some instances, the service revolver is purchased through the department. In other instances, that weapon might be purchased individually for that law enforcement personnel, with the understanding that the police chief of that department says that he or she could carry that service weapon in his or her capacity as a sworn law enforcement personnel through you.
Representative Gibran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So on line 73, when it said official duties or when off duty, that would apply to whether the weapon was private or departmentally purchased. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, the answer would be yes.
Okay.
Representative Gibran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do appreciate that clarification because in small towns all over the state where we have state troopers, a lot of times I understand that they purchase their own weapons. Through you, Mr. Speaker, I do have another question. In that same area, I certainly understand why the explanation of different members, for instance, organized police departments or people within the Department of Correction, certainly officers within DEEP. But, Mr. Speaker, my question is, I really don't understand why the carve-out for a salaried inspector of a motor vehicle designated by the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles. Through you, Mr. Speaker, why is it necessary for these employees to have a large capacity magazine? Through you.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, there are a number of state agencies that actually have peace officer status, and this was a number of state agencies that came to us, including the state's attorney's office, realizing when the initial bill was written and voted upon that we were not including them, and that's the reason for a number of different agencies within that specific section. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Gibran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So through you, am I to understand then that the chief inspector, or I'm sorry, a salaried inspector of a motor vehicle has the same duties as a police officer? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, that these individuals are post-certified, so the answer would be yes.
Representative Gibran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I really appreciate that clarification because when you're reading it to the average layperson, you wouldn't realize that's the case. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, I also have been contacted by a couple of other groups of people who are in dangerous lines of work. For instance, bail enforcement personnel and security personnel. Through you, Mr. Speaker, why were they not included in sections 60 through 73? Through you.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, although I wasn't involved in the negotiations, those individuals that you mentioned are not post-certified or peace officer status. Through you.
Representative Gibran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So that clarifies that for me. So I guess just for the legislative intent, only post-certified folks, no matter what department they serve in, would be allowed through this area to carry a large capacity magazine. Through you, sir.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I think the answer would be anyone with sworn duties. Through you.
Representative Gibran.
Thank you. So, can you please, you, Mr. Speaker, to the good representative, show me where it says sworn duties, just for my clarification. Through you, please.
Representative Dargan. Take your time if you need.
No, through you. If you go to line 60, that might be of some help, and also. There's a good example on line 82 dealing with armed car service personnel that might be helpful to you, that some of the prior organizations you met, that they might in the future be able to have conversations with DESPI on what some of those specific issues they are in order to possibly in the future be able to have the right to carry in their capacity within their job specification. Through you.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yes, the line 82 is very helpful for me to understand the difference. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam. Do you care to remark further? Do you care to remark further on the bill as amended? Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the second time, I'm appreciative for your indulgence. Through you, Mr. Speaker, I just have one follow-up question which I neglected to ask.
Sure.
To Representative Dargan. I'm looking at line 841. And basically, 841 eliminates this entire section which speaks about a national instant criminal background check. And it is replaced by lines 847 to 853, where simply they speak about the transferor calling or contacting the Department of Emergency Services. But then, if I flip back to line 889, that speaks again about the national instant criminal background check to determine if the prospective transferee is eligible to receive such long gun. And somehow that language confused me because it seems to be taking it out one way and then replacing it and then putting it back in the body of the language. May I inquire through you, Mr. Speaker, for an explanation?
Representative Dargan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Now what we do is we ask a firearm dealer, instead of going through the national NICS system, to go through our state emergency services public protection on the possibility of prospective transfer and or the purchase of any one of these weapons through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you, Mr. Speaker, then, am I to include that the national background check is no longer needed as presented in this legislation? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, no, it is needed, but instead of the dealers going through the federal system, we feel it's a little more efficient for them on transfer of guns or a number of other issues to go through our Department of Emergency Service and Public Protection. We feel that it's a more efficient manner and quick manner because some of the issues have been that on the federal level it's taken too long in order to get back to specific dealers on this. Through you.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that is basically what I was inquiring about, is the length of time that it takes to receive that notification or to receive the permission. But the question that I still have, so then how is the background check is being provided? Is there still, it seems to me that in line 889, it specifically says about the national background check. How is that then produced? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, thank you. So you want to apply for a weapon, and your dealer, instead of going through NICS, goes through DESP, and then DESP and or the Board of Firearms Permits will go through NICS in order to get that information back to that dealer. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, Mr. Speaker, then in all of this duration that is taken, the time that is requiring to get the permit from the state and the background check, at that time, at any time during this period, would the person buying or purchasing the firearm be in a possession of the firearm, or he or she will have to wait until all permits, including the background check, come back? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, the good gentleman, what he characterized is correct, yes.
Representative Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Would you care to remark further on the bill as amended? The distinguished minority leader, Representative Cafaro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to make some general comments on the bill, but before I do, I think it is vitally important that we make some clarification here, because I think in the give and take of several questions that were asked to Representative Dargan, there may be some misunderstandings. I want to remind the chamber that before we passed the gun bill on April 4th of this year, we obviously had an assault weapon law on the books in the state of Connecticut. It was 53-202A. And what it said is that an assault weapon will be defined as follows when it comes to semi-automatic rifles. It said a semi-automatic rifle that has an ability to accept a detachable magazine. So that sort of starts it all. If your semi-automatic rifle can accept a detachable magazine, it said under the old law, any semi-automatic rifle, either a .22 caliber rimfire or a centerfire rifle, if it had two of the following characteristics, it was considered an assault rifle. Two. If it had two of it, you could have one, but not two. And of the following features: a folding or telescopic stock, a pistol grip, a bayonet mount, a flash suppressor, or a grenade launcher. If it had a detachable magazine and two of those things, it was banned since 1994. When we passed the law in April, we said we're going to redefine what an assault weapon is, and that is if it has a detachable magazine and one of the following features. And it listed a whole bunch of features, but that rifle had to be a center fire rifle, meaning that we allowed all of the .22 caliber plinkers, as they're called, not to fall under that new definition of an assault rifle, but never the intent to take them out of the old definition of an assault rifle. So, for instance, a question was asked earlier by Representative Piscopo about the announcement Stag Arms, the gun manufacturer, I believe in Bristol, announced, wherein they took what was an AR-15 model gun that before April was legal even as a centerfire rifle, and after April became illegal as a centerfire rifle. And they made it a rim-fired rifle. And Representative Piscopo asked, would that be legal under this current law? The answer is yes, it would. Why? Because it's rim-fired, it's semi-automatic with a detachable magazine, and it only has one, not two, of the characteristics that going back to the old law. It only has that pistol grip. So it would be legal. I want to make sure we understand that. So that being the case, to go back to Representative Sampson's question, there are no new guns that by the passage of the bill that's before us, that were legal before that we're making illegal. The exception or clarification pertains to the following. Between April 4th and today, or when this bill, if it passes, is signed, there were some that were confused and said, all rim-fired rifles are even now exempt from the old ban, meaning they can have a detachable magazine and a pistol grip and a folding stock and a bayonet clip. That's wrong. That's wrong. But if someone was confused to that and happened between April 4th and today to have happened to buy a gun that had those features, we don't want them to be considered criminals. So this law that's before us that we're about to pass, this bill, says if you happen to be in that category, keep your gun as it is. Just register it. it is vitally important that that is clear to the gun manufacturers so they know what they can and cannot do, and to people out there who are law-abiding gun owners so they know how they could remain such. And that brings, first of all, I want to confirm that. Through you, Mr. Speaker, Representative Dargan, are the representations I just made true and accurate for legislative intent? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dargan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, as we've gone forward this year, there's been a lot of confusion on what that terminology has been, and Representative Cafaro has characterized that, and the answer is yes, through you.
Representative Cafaro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, when the whole gun debate started this particular session, each individual had a different way of thinking about the legislation that we were working on, its purposes, its goals, etc. For me personally, and I happen to be intimately involved in the negotiation of the bill, of course, public safety was paramount. But what was also so important to me is 2 points. One, that we protected law-abiding gun owners. That nothing we were going to do by a word in a bill or the signing of that into law was going to make someone who is law-abiding on a Wednesday a criminal on a Thursday. It was wrong to do that. The second thing that was very important for me personally is that these law-abiding gun owners who were in ownership and possession of their various guns, having followed all the rules, were not put in a position by the passage of the bill or the signing of that bill into law wherein someone had to go and take away what they lawfully owned. Those 3 things were of paramount importance to me. Public safety, to make sure we weren't making law-abiding gun owners instant criminals and putting them at risk of being felons or otherwise, and not taking anything away that was lawfully someone's property. And we accomplished that in the underlying bill. You might not like it, for the bill we did in April. You might not like it for what we did prospectively. I get that. I respect that. But at very least, you're going to have to admit, we didn't take guns or magazines. We didn't take anything away from anyone. And to the best of our ability, made nobody an instant criminal. Now, since the passage of this bill, we found out a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff that bill had made unintended consequences. A lot of people who maybe consigned their guns or had ordered their guns and were just waiting for delivery were being deprived of their guns. A lot of gun manufacturers said, oh my God, does this mean I can't take the parts to be finished or tooled or whatever? Would I now all of a sudden be a criminal? If I all of a sudden had an 18 or 19 or 20-year-old person working in my manufacturing plant and they were making a gun that otherwise they couldn't handle if they were 20, am I a criminal? And the leaders said, we got to straighten that out because, again, our goal is not to make law-abiding citizens criminals. And that was the purpose of this bill. We even went beyond that. I'll give you an example. I have a constituent in my district. A law-abiding 63-year-old man. He hasn't so much as had a traffic ticket in the last 40 years. He was a gun lover, a law-abiding gun owner. He owned pistols, collected them lawfully, followed all the rules. And even unrelated to the bill we passed in April, all of a sudden he got a call from his local police department, Norwalk's police department, because they had got a call from the Department of Public Safety saying that since 12/14, there was more scrutiny being paid attention to things, and they happened to review his records. And they found that in 1971, when he was 20 years old, on mischief night, he had an egg thrown at his car, and he threw one back and hit the kid in the head. And he had to pay a $10 fine for what was known as assault 3, a misdemeanor. This is in 1971. And in 1976, and every 5 years later, he got a pistol permit. And he owned pistols. And all of a sudden, he found that all his pistols were taken away from him just last January because of a 41-year-old violation. That's not fair, and it's not right. And this bill corrects that. It says if you committed a misdemeanor prior to 1994, it's not going to be counted for eligibility when you apply for a pistol permit or some of these other eligibility certificates. And in the case of my constituent, he's going to get his guns back. That's the purpose of this bill. Now, I know there's a lot of emotions with the whole issue. God, did I learn that? But this particular bill is for the purpose of keeping and making it clear that we are not in the business of passing a bill to make instant criminals and play gotcha. We're not in the business of saying, we want your gun, we'll take your gun, we're going to confiscate stuff. Oh, maybe some people might like that, but that's not what we did, and this makes it clear we're not doing it. And that's why I'm proud of it, and that's why I'm supporting it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Staff and guests of the well of the House, members take your seats. The machine will be open.
The House of Representatives voting by roll. The House of Representatives voting by roll. Will members please return to the chamber immediately?
Have all the members voted? Have all the members voted? Will the members please check the board to make sure your vote is properly cast? If all the members have voted, the machine will be locked and the clerk will take a tally.
131, 15, 4.
Clerk, please announce the tally.
In concurrence with the Senate, Senate Bill 1094, amended by Senate A and B, total number voting 146, necessary for passage 74, those voting yea 131, voting nay 15, absent not voting 4.
The bill as amended passes in concurrence with the Senate.